In this video, we have compiled the coolest experiments. Do not repeat the shown experiments at home under any circumstances. After all, we are professionals. We have goggles, gloves, a fire extinguisher and a smart cat who knows all the safety rules. And so, for the first level, we need a piece of paper with square markings, which is cut into several pieces. You can see that after we put them together. But if we do the same rearranging the pieces in a different order, we can see that one square has somehow disappeared. Are there any geniuses among you who can understand how this works? Stefan says he knows the secret, but he won't reveal it. For the 10th level, we need this magical X-ray plate sent to me from China and several colored pencils. Let's check what happens when we look through it. All the bottom pencils disappear and we see only the top ones. But turning the lens 90 degrees, we see only the bottom pencils and the top ones become transparent. I don't know how it works, but it works even with a finger. Level 20. We need to balance two red apples hanging on a rope. It's hard to believe, but if you bring a magnet to the apple, its magnetic field will repel the apple from itself. You can even build a small ship on magnetic propulsion using the apple as a sail. Level 30, we take a syringe with a needle bought in a pharmacy. The needle should be poked into an ordinary candle so that its hole is clogged with the paraffin and doesn't allow air to pass through. Next, remove the needle, fill a little more than half of the syringe with air and close the hole. Now, we create high pressure inside the syringe, pressing the piston, which at a certain point pushes the projectile out and it flies towards at great speed. Thicker cardboard is not a problem either. With a little practice, I managed to hit the target from quite a long distance and cause significant damage to the apple. This is at ordinary jewelry scale on which we put pieces of paper. Setting fire to the paper, we notice how rapidly it becomes lighter, which is logical because it burns and leaves only ash. Now, we will try to conduct the same experiment with a piece of steel wool. We set it on fire and look not at how beautifully it burns, but at the weight, which doesn't decrease at all. But on the contrary, it increases. What? How can this be? Why does the burning iron become even heavier? For level 50, we need a plastic cup with plain water. When we set it on fire, it seems that the water should spill over. However, this doesn't happen, and the flame stops right at the water level. The reason is that the water in this place instantly absorbs all the heat from the plastic and prevents it from melting. We tried placing the flame under the cup, and after a few minutes we managed to heat the water to such an extent that we were able to brew a tea bag in it. Still, I certainly don't recommend drinking water heated in a plastic cup. But we are not done yet. Look at how quickly paper ignites when we bring a flame to it. Now we wrap it around a glass vessel and do the same thing. The paper doesn't burn at all, because it passes all the heat through and transfers it to the heat-resistant vessel. Get ready for level 60. We need a box of matches, from which we need to scrape off all the substance on its sides. After that, we need a few drops of water. Dip the head of the match in the water and immediately envelop it in the obtained substance. Now, we put all these genetically modified matches into the sun and dry them out. After a while, we get magical matches that can be lit even by rubbing them against ordinary paper, against a piece of board, the sole of an old sneaker, a rock, a chicken egg, and an old lawnmower. It's not a miracle, it's just ordinary magic. On the 70th level, we have an experiment familiar to many people, in which a little alcohol is dropped into a glass bottle, and by bringing the flame, we get this visual and sound effect. The problem is that it works not every time, and the blue flame is not so bright, and sometimes we get something like this. However, the experiment can be improved with matches and an ordinary pen wrapped in aluminium foil. We insert a tube into the bottle and light it. The matches ignite and a lot of white smoke accumulates in the bottle. Let's add a drop of alcohol and try once again. Wow! Now the experiment is much more spectacular. We can see a beautiful bright yellow flame that flows inside the bottle and makes a distinctive sound. Get ready for the experiment of the 80th level. These are two substances for molecular gastronomy. Pour water into a container and add about 4 cm of the first powder. Stir with a mixer until homogeneous. Then take 3 cm of the second white powder and pour it into another container with water. When everything dissolves, take a thicker mixture with a round deep scoop. Wipe off the excess and carefully pour it into the second mixture. Looks like the liquids have just mixed and nothing will happen. But let's take a closer look at what we get out of the container. It's a soft transparent jelly egg with a solidified shell and still liquid content, which is confirmed by the autopsy. We decided to do the same experiment with Coca-Cola, mixing it with powder number 1. As a result, we should get an edible Coke pod, but I'm not sure if it's going to work. Carefully pour it out. And yes, we have an airtight Coke pod. You can eat it in one piece or just drink the Coke from the inside of the pod. This might be the technology that will replace plastic bottles in the future. After all, it's edible. Don't believe me? Then watch this. The 90th level requires us to find a thick stick, thanks to which we'll master dark magic and be able to summon underground creatures. All we need to do is make several grooves in it with the help of a rasp at the same distance from each other. Sharpen the stick on the other end. Find a thinner stick or a metal tube. After that, drive the thick stick into the ground. Now start rubbing the tube against the grooves we made. It looks like a joke, but it really works, and in this way we summon the earthworms. And it's not fake. Look at this shot. You can see the worm being summoned from under the ground with your own eyes. Apparently, these sounds remind the worms of the sound of the rain or the sound of a mole, and they're moving to the surface so they don't drown or get eaten by the mole. Here's another one, and another one. We managed to summon as many as 6 of these Pokemons in a matter of minutes. However, we wanted to simplify and automate the process with a small stick and an electric screwdriver with the impact mode, which will create vibrations that will be transmitted to the ground through a small board. And within 30 seconds, this fat little guy came out of the ground. And don't worry, not a single worm was harmed during the experiment. Now we move on to level 100 of complexity, in which we will create a device from an ordinary transparent jar and metal elements that will generate real fuel from ordinary water. We need to measure and cut 4 rods with threads, with a length just above the height of the jar. Then successively put nuts and washers on them. I bought all the materials at a hardware store for about $2. After 20 minutes of work, we got these 4 rods which will form the basis of our generator. Mark and drill 4 holes corresponding to the diameter of the rods on the lid of the jar. Next, we took a construction rivet and extracted a metal rod from it. We inserted the remaining part into the lid and fixed it with 2-component epoxy resin. Put a piece of heat shrink tubing on the top of the rods so they don't come in contact with the metal lid when we insert them through the holes. After installing the plastic gaskets and fixing all the rods with nuts, we obtained this kind of a unit with electrodes. It's necessary to connect the rods into pairs with the help of wires. Fill the jar with distilled water and a small amount of drain cleaner. Screw the lid in place, attach a compartment for AA batteries on the side and connect the power supply. At that moment, the electrodes start working and split the water into oxygen and flammable hydrogen. This mixture comes out through the hole in the lid, to which we connect a medical drip tube. Next, we dip the tip of the tube in a container of water and observe the bubbles rising from the surface. Due to the fact that they contain not only combustible hydrogen, but also oxygen, which is required for combustion, the bubbles not only light up but even seem to explode, emitting distinctive popping sounds. To get even more gas, we connect a power supply to the generator, which can produce much more voltage than batteries. By adding a little liquid soap to the water, we are now able to collect a lot of gas bubbles and check out the result. Wow, it sounds much more louder and looks much more spectacular. At this point, we even spotted a little nuclear mushroom. For the next step, we add a small jar in the middle of the setup and put a blunted syringe needle on its end. Now we can ignite it and get a micro gas torch that burns with a bright yellow flame. Despite its micro size, the flame is so hot that it can melt wire solder and even cut aluminium foil, which can be used for some fine work. If you liked the video, then we worked hard not in vain.